It is our great honor to have Ms. Sophie Punta, Managing Director of Policy with the We Mean Business Coalition, to deliver her keynote presentation on post-COP27. Although she cannot join us in person today, she has recorded a video for us. Let's hear from Sophie now.
Hello, my name is Sophie Punta, Managing Director of We Mean Business Coalition, calling from Amsterdam, and really pleased to be here with you this morning. I'd like to explain to you the COP27 and implications from business, starting with what's on the table most urgently, 1.5. At the moment, 1.5 seems out of reach. The climate tracker found that existing policies and actions will get us to 2.5, and even under the most optimistic scenario, we're probably sticking at 1.8. The UNEP also concluded that there's no credible pathway to 1.5 in place, and the International Energy Agency found that the national pledges of countries will barely cut emissions by 2030 compared to 2019. However, we can't give up on 1.5 because every fraction of a degree matters. And why is that? Because there's a number of what we call tipping points. For example, the Amazon rainforest disappearing, or the Arctic sea ice melting, or the Atlantic circulation stopping, or the coral reefs disappearing. And once those tipping points are reached, then there's no way back, even if we reduce the temperature to pre-industrial levels. So it's really important that we try to stick to emission reduction as much as possible to avoid that these tipping points happen. So when we went to COP at the Women Business Coalition, that was our first and foremost objective, to get the coordinated and ambitious voice to COP to stay on track for 1.5 and halve emissions by 2030. Looking at policy advocacy, focusing on 1.5, mitigation action, especially focusing on the clean energy transition, building resilience and addressing impacts as a result of climate change, and finally aligning finance. We also focus on climate leadership, which includes ambition, taking action, advocating for supportive policies, and accountability. And the third thing we did is we set up a business pavilion for climate leadership where we held events, we had meeting rooms available, we had a studio, and we had a social area. But in this business pavilion, there were so many highlights because we had more than 100 events. We had more than 22,000 views from people outside the COP who were looking at the events. We had more than 80 partners and sponsors, and we had, through our social media messaging, more than 3 million people reached. What was really notable is that the business pavilion, again, just like last year, became the center of gravity for businesses. And it was just so nice to see how many businesses were proactive. So let me explain to you what the implications are for you as businesses going into next year along the business climate leadership, or the 4 A's. So first, we focused on ambition. And what we did in the first week at COP is we came out with a business message that 1.5 is a limit, not a target. So every fraction of a degree matters, because the closer we stick to 1.5, the less likely those tipping points are going to happen. And so we had a statement issued that was signed by more than 250 companies and organizations within 48 hours, which was incredible. And this was then handed over by our CEO, Maria Mendeluce, to Simon Steele, who's the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC. And this statement could not have come at a better time, because already then there were discussions around whether 1.5 should stay in the agreement of COP27. So then let's move on to action. But what is really clear, that businesses are leading on action, but also that they can't act alone. So what is really important to get from ambition to action is to get clarity on what action looks like. And in our business pavilion, we try to make this clear together with Marrakesh Partnership leads. So we looked at forest, at electricity, at buildings, at finance, at industry and transport. So to give you an example, if we want to halve emissions by 2030, we need at least 61% of the global electricity to be from renewable energy sources by then. Much more concrete and something that businesses can contribute to. But there also are themes around it. There's a growing demand, supply and infrastructure needed. And for example, the First Movers Coalition announced an expanded partnership with more and more companies committing to net zero products. But we also saw the increasing number of supply chain and scope 3 collaboration. For example, for freight, we saw more collaboration happening between OEMs, the shippers of freight, and the road freight carriers. We saw the link with nature appearing more and more prominently, and that will continue at the COP15 on biodiversity that's happening in December in Montreal. Just transition and climate justice were very much on the fore and will no longer disappear. So companies taking action must look at how they incorporate the workers and the communities where they are based. International collaboration was very strong with the Breakthrough Agenda report that was just issued before COP, and the Pivot Point report looked at voluntary initiatives and regulations. So businesses can act but need to work with all these developments and initiatives around them. If we then go to advocacy, what we found at the COP is a mixed result. Overall, businesses, including our coalition, were disappointed with the COP statement because we barely hit what was agreed last year, but there were some lights too. So the first one was that we saw continued 1.5 recognition, but the recognition was limited. So there was weak progress on mitigation, with very few countries coming up with stronger NDCs. But on the positive, we saw a mitigation work program being launched with active participation of non-state actors, including business. And this work program will lay out what needs to happen until 2030 to halve emissions. On clean energy, we saw momentum. It was a surprise to many that India came with a proposal to phase down all fossil fuels and not just coal, as was agreed in COP27. Unfortunately, this was not approved, especially by oil-producing countries, and because of that, this did not make it into the statement. However, it's on the table. So the phase down of fossil fuels is not going to disappear from the climate agenda and will certainly come back at COP28. We also saw the accelerating transition to renewables that was recognized as a part of the energy crisis solution. So the energy crisis was acknowledged as being a reason to accelerate the energy transition. On loss and damage, we saw a major breakthrough that there has been agreement to establish a fund, and that was important to rebuild the trust between the North and South. Details will need to be worked out. And finally, on aligning finance, there was a call for multilateral development banks and international finance to be reformed to significantly increase climate ambition. There was more investments needed for renewable energy and the further transformation of broader sectors to low carbon economy in line with the IEA report. However, there was limited progress on the adaptation finance plan, and the 100 billion that developed countries promised to developing countries still has not been delivered. So let's move on to accountability. There are three announcements that are relevant to you businesses that stand out. The first one is the ISO issued the net zero guidelines. It's like guidelines that gives guiding principles and signposts to all the initiatives that exist right now that are trying to address net zero. So not so much a standard or in its own right, but much more one that gives an overview of what exists and where net zero development should go to. The high-level experts group from the UN Secretary General came out with its report on what net zero should be. And we were positively surprised that this was very ambitious and really set a high benchmark for what net zero is. And I recommend every business to have a look at it, because those principles are also going to matter to you. And finally, then there was the International Sustainability Standards Board. They have report disclosure criteria, and they have agreed and announced with CDP that CDP will include those ISSB in their questionnaires. What it means for businesses is that you can report directly to CDP, including on the ISSB criteria, which is a major improvement. Now, finally, I would like to leave you with the message that you should be a climate leader. For next year, look at all the 4 A's. Ambition. Do you have strong enough targets? Action. Are you taking actions, not just inside your company, but also engaging with your supply chains and looking beyond just climate as an emission or energy related area, but also look at nature-based solutions, which are going to be key part of the future. Thirdly is advocacy. We need many more companies to actively engage with policy development, because supportive policies depend also on businesses saying we need those policies to be in place. And finally, accountability. Disclosure and accountability is here to stay. Investors are asking it, governments are asking it, stakeholders are asking it. So show and share your publicly what your progress has been in your roadmap to net zero. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a nice conference.
Hope you have enjoyed Ms. Punta's video. To begin the third session on construction and properties, life cycle perspective, it is with great pleasure to invite Ms. Emma Harvey, Group Sustainability Manager of Gammon Construction Limited, to deliver her keynote presentation. Ms. Harvey, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're not feeling too sleepy after your lunch. I almost didn't make it back at all. So nice to see you all here this afternoon. So a very moving speech there from Sophie about the 4 A's. We're not quite there yet, but I think we're starting. And I'm going to share a little bit about how we are committing to, I'm just wondering what to press. One of these? The green one, excellent. We're committing to carbon reduction in construction, and so I'm going to share a little bit about our journey so far. Starting here, just to make sure you're aware of what our business covers, we basically go from foundations all the way through to interiors, if necessary, on projects. So it could be civil projects, it could be building projects. We also produce our own concrete, not our own cement, but our own concrete. And we also have a steel fabrication plant, and we have our own plant and equipment. So a very broad range of challenges there to consider in our science-based target. We obviously took a while thinking about this and how we were going to approach it, and talking to our exco and talking to our chief executive and our finance director, and working with a consultant, an expert consultant, to help us on this journey, and setting up those focus groups to discuss within our business on what we thought we could commit to. I'm pleased to say that we have achieved some kind of consensus, and we have submitted at least our commitment to do a science-based target based on a 2021 baseline and a 2033 target. It's just a near-term target at the moment. To be honest with you, a net zero by 2050 for our industry is a bit of a challenge, and as you can see, we're the first company in Hong Kong to have done this. So pleased and somewhat terrified. Alignment with what we want to discuss today then, it's focusing on our sector, and particularly how does Gammon's decarbonisation roadmap affect the life cycle of a project, because we're all going to be contributing to it. There's been a bit of a discussion already on embodied carbon and operational carbon, just to make sure you're clear of the difference. The embodied carbon is really what's wrapped up in the materials, extraction, processing, manufacture, and also the carbon that we emit at the site level, whereas operational carbon is obviously what's happening after we've handed over that project. Some of you may have seen this before. What I'm focusing on is the upfront carbon, so that's the product stage and construction stage, and obviously if we can help contribute in that part of the life cycle, that will help an overall project to decarbonise. You can see here roughly where that occurs. So we're contributing at the front end, that big red bar on construction stage. We hand over the project at practical completion, and then the operational and emissions and occasional embodied carbon emissions occur as chillers are replaced or there's refurbishment until you get to the end of life. But we pretty much stop having an involvement in the project at practical completion. So let me share with you our carbon commitment action plan, we've called it. We started with our greenhouse gas inventory, and the likes of Eddie in our team have been working on this for a long time to get our inventory into a reasonable shape so we can actually understand it and take action on it. We use that inventory to inform our actions and then to develop a framework and a plan. Some of this terminology has already been mentioned this morning, but just to make sure you appreciate that our Scope 1 emissions are dominated by on-site diesel. Scope 2 is electricity, but the major part of our challenge is, of course, the materials under our Scope 3 are indirect emissions that lie within our supply chain, within our value chain. So here's the scope of the challenge. 1.5 million tonnes in 2021 of carbon emissions, 94% in our supply chain. So quite a challenge for us to tackle, but nevertheless, we're giving it a go. We've worked out a bit of a framework. When you're looking at climate change, there's normally the 3 areas where action needs to be focused: mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. So what we're talking about here is our mitigation plan. And it's falling into these sort of activities. First of all, I'll share a bit about the major interventions or strategies under our 2 different scopes and our 2 different targets. And then I'll share a little bit more about the rest of it later on. So a reminder, Scope 1 and 2 is mostly our energy-related emissions. We have to reduce by 55% by 2033. You can see that our challenge lies in the diesel usage, and over 75% is in diesel or biodiesel as we use in Hong Kong. Not much electricity, but we want that proportion actually to get, well, not bigger, but we want to switch out diesel into electricity as our focus to start with up to 2033. So early temporary electricity is key to that transition. That means that we can phase out our diesel generators. It also means that we can use more electric plant and, of course, vehicles on site. We need, in parallel, to make sure we're being as efficient as possible in our operations. And one of those ways that's going to help us is modern methods of construction. But, of course, we have to, if we take any work off-site, we've got to include that in our carbon footprint as well. I'll just run you through a couple of examples. So there's movement, and in fact, some people in the audience already are making commitments on electricity supply on projects, and the government has also made a commitment on projects on public works projects to have some electricity at day one. But it's really important that we have enough. And then we can get rid of those diesel generators and we can get more electric plant into our sites. And we can back that up with these battery energy storage systems like the Entertainer, which are particularly excellent for vertical lifting. If you're not a member of the Power Up Coalition yet and you have involvement in projects, please contact BEC, who are organising that coalition, and we can certainly explain a bit more to you about that. So with the electricity supply being available, we can then use our electric plant and equipment that we're going to be buying more of. And the one in the middle there, is the first electric crawler crane, 160-ton crawler crane that's going to be hopefully working on our project within the year. So that's very exciting. The photograph on the right is taken from a place called Bauma, the Bauma Fair in Munich. This is a plant and equipment annual fair, and we just had a couple of our folks go and visit that fair, and they were very pleased to see a dramatic increase in the availability of electric plant and equipment, including some of the foundations equipment, which we think are going to be very difficult to decarbonise. So this is all very encouraging. Also in the future, and probably within 10 years, I expect we will be using hydrogen in our projects. It may not be green, but we think it's also part of the solution longer term. Modern methods of construction, this is a range of methods. It mainly involves some kind of off-site prefabrication and adopting a manufacturing approach to construction. We always do prototypes. It's so inefficient. We don't get the opportunities for the efficiencies that you might get in a manufacturing process. So the more that we can take off-site and standardize and manufacture, the better efficiencies we can achieve. Here's a bit of a waterfall diagram to show then where we think we can make the savings. This is starting on the left then what our current footprint is for Scope 1 and 2, and on the right where it should be by 2033. So you can see the contributions, efficiency, electrification, the grid factor should also give us a bit of a help. But you can see that black bar, is it black or dark blue? Not sure. That's a gap. We still need to work out how we're going to do this. We've got 10 years. I think it's enough, but it's still going to be a challenge to achieve. That's, got 5 minutes left, right? Scope 3, mainly embodied carbon in materials. Let's have a quick look at that. The scope of the challenge. About half of our materials embodied carbon is wrapped up in metals of some kind, and about a quarter in cement and concrete. You can see rebar, piling materials, structural steel, all of those roughly equal split. And this includes our supply chain and subcontractors. Here it is split up in a slightly different way. The big blue portion on the left is the procurement that's done within our supply chain. The other parts we directly purchase, but the supply chain procures a lot of materials, so influencing and working with those subcontractors is going to be critical. What are our strategies for Scope 3 reduction? Reusing piling and structural steel as much as possible, again and again, modularizing it and reusing it like Lego. It's almost endless the number of times we can use this steel product, so we should really take advantage of that. Procuring lower carbon rebar, hopefully with the support of our project owners to go ahead with that. Big saving opportunities. Lower carbon concrete, we've already been producing for quite a number of years. Less materials in design, less money, we love that. Less materials due to method, another way of saving money and making it more efficient. And finally, choosing alternative materials. We haven't explored all of the opportunities in the construction sector by any means, particularly when we're looking at some of the most recent projects that are arising in Europe and the United States. So here's an example of how we are already reusing modular struts on the project Kai Tak West Central Kowloon route. More of those to come. Collaboration with the value chain is absolutely essential, and making use of some of the certification schemes so we have confidence in emission factors. On our concrete side, cement replacement is a key initiative and has been for a number of years, but we want to do more replacement with GGBS, and we've also got this technology on our Tunmun plant, Carbon Cure, which injects some carbon dioxide into the process and helps reduce cement further, but not huge savings, but every little bit counts, as somebody said earlier. And using smart design tools and things like the CIC carbon assessment to make sure we're optimizing design and optimizing the use of BIM and making sure we're designing out carbon in the life cycle assessment process. Making sure designs are fixed so we don't waste materials, and modern methods of construction will also help us, and that will also help to reduce our carbon footprint associated with waste, which is obviously a challenge in Hong Kong. I mentioned the lower carbon materials, plenty of choices on the market at the moment. Don't have a massive impact, but yep, it's all good stuff. The future really needs to include mass engineered timber, hybrid construction as a solution as well. And I hope that definitely happens within the next 10 years. Our trajectory, as I say, we've been working with a consultant to help us with this. So they've been making assumptions and doing this modelling work that is essential as part of this science-based target process. But it's not looking too bad. The final thing then I will go through is what we're trying to do in terms of bringing those bigger approaches into actual actions within the divisions and functions, and also some of the commitments we're making in terms of group level commitments. And you can see I've just extracted a few here to give you a flavour. We're still working out these. These are a work in progress. But phasing out all diesel generators by 2033. Not only will that be a good thing for the planet, but it's also a good thing for the people on our sites. I won't read through those, especially because I've only got a minute left. And converting between 20 to 50% of site diesel plant and equipment to electric by 2033. Still working out that replacement program and what we think we might be able to do, but I think that's within reach. Each division will be given an emission limit for each year, and that will actually be tied into the scorecard for our senior folk within the business. So I think that's an excellent addition. And on the scope 3 then, a few of our other commitments. The supply chain engagement piece is a big bit of work. We haven't really started this yet, but we will make a commitment to use a ramping up percentage of gold or platinum certified products. And importantly, all projects at the tender, all projects with a significant carbon impact will be quantified at the tender process in terms of steel, concrete, and diesel or energy. And for new projects that we do win, we will quantify the carbon of the carbon-intensive materials and the savings through design optimization. So that just gives you a flavour. In 15 minutes, I've gone over time, of where we are. And the final piece of the puzzle, I think, is the data tracking and disclosure, which we will continue to do through our annual report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Harvey, for sharing some very encouraging progress from Gammon and also from the industry. Up next, may we invite Mr. M.K. Leung, Director of Sustainable Design with Ronald Liu and Partners, to give us a presentation keynote. Mr. Leung, please.
Right. Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, and friends online and in person. My title today is Rethinking Design for Net Zero, Quick Wins, Exemplars, and Moonshots. Our company has committed to Pathway 2 of BEC Low Carbon Charter back in 2019. In the same year, we had our well below 2 degree aligned science-based target approved by SBTi for our business operations. Our decarbonization actions, disclosure, and advocacy demonstrate our continued commitment towards net zero. This year, we commit to 1.5 degree. And we are the first architectural firm in China to take such a bold step. Besides a more demanding carbon reduction percentage of 38% for our scope 1, 2, and 3, we also include, for the first time, the lifetime emissions estimations of all our designed buildings in scope 3. From our carbon emissions monitoring, we are well ahead of our target. Great news. This shows our carbon reductions for our business operations. And as our drive our carbon down, together with the gradual grid decarbonizations, we are right on track to the zero carbon roadmap of the city. And this is about our designed buildings. And what this all means is for all the new buildings we're going to design today, we are going to actually, aim for carbon reductions of 25% if it is going to be complete, say, for 2025. And for our design buildings that will be completed by 2028, we need to aim higher for reductions of 40%. And these are some of our completed buildings last year that already achieved reductions of about 25 to 40%. Well, for Hong Kong GBC, we know is rolling out the super low energy building certification very soon. These are some of the benchmarks while the industry are looking at for low, extra low, and super low. To contribute to a Hong Kong carbon neutrality journey, RLP is committing to design for extra low and eventually super low energy buildings from now on. Looking at the definitions of carbon neutrality and net zero, well, from the UN climate change framework, we know they are actually not quite the same. Net zero is about equilibrium of carbon emissions and permanent removals. Carbon neutrality, on the other hand, promotes reductions in both operational and embodied carbon, as Emma mentioned, while we may bring operational carbon to zero by eventually grid decarbonizations. There are still embodied carbons in materials where offsets probably may be inevitable. This information on global CO2 emissions probably is not new to this informed audience. The split of the operational and embodied carbon is about 70% and 30%. But when we take account of the coming grid decarbonizations, the split of operational and embodied carbon probably will be reversed very soon. This is a picture for the UK, and I guess Hong Kong will be quite the same very soon. Embodied carbon would become the much bigger share. Then how shall we design for carbon neutrality or eventually net zero? Drawing from the design and research, well, we have mapped out a few dozen of design strategies addressing carbon reductions in different stages according to the positive impact they may bring and the potential challenges they may face. I will share the thought process on how we may prioritize these strategies in design and construction in the near, mid, and long term. We look at KPIs under 8 aspects here, as mentioned, related to the impacts and challenges. We have also engaged stakeholders and our business partners on their views on the mapping exercise. Well, what we find out that the quick wins are current, probably industry best practice with relatively low challenges. Exemplars are the higher impact strategies with moderate challenges. And the moonshots are more visionary in a way. They need the building sector, well, we together, and to achieve system change to overcome some implementation challenges. In the interest of time, I would highlight only a few of the quick wins, exemplars, and moonshots to inform this discussion. On quick wins, I think, well, first and foremost, we need to recognize the constraint as well as opportunities of the vertical microclimate in our city of skyscraper. Built forms and functions shall work with varied vertical climates at different heights. Mid and high zone of the tower, of course, is subject to stronger solar irradiations and wind, larger extent of solar shade, integrated with solar thermal or PV for higher zones are needed. And rooftop, subject to the highest solar energy exposure, must be harnessed while the opportunity. Appropriate window-to-wall ratio actually is big quick wins. Well, in the order of 40 to 60% is quite a good balance rather than a fully glazed curtain wall to achieve a balance of the thermal transfer through the envelope and the views and date lighting. High-performance space conditioning definitely is crucial for non-domestic buildings, which typically constitutes the biggest energy share. From a life cycle cost perspective, radiant panels combining with dedicated outdoor air systems can achieve substantial saving. On embodied carbon, well, which is the big topic, building structure typically constitutes about 70% of the upfront carbon. Exoskeleton is embodied carbon intensive and should be minimized or avoided if necessary. For the embodied carbons, of course, we can control it with appropriate structural span, balancing functionality and sustainability. Emma has talked about GGBS, PFA, and all these means. And from our studies, actually, they can achieve an order of like 40 to 50% reductions of the embodied carbon in the structural elements. Another quick win is to locate the heavy MEP either in the basement or lower floors, just to reduce the loading on the upper stories. Thus, the columns in the upper floors can be thinner with lower embodied carbon. While coming to the exemplars, well, we can consider outperform building permeability and urban greenery benchmark of the sustainable building design guidelines, bearing in mind those guidelines are just benchmarking, well, the minimum, like the benchmark of Mongkok for building permeability. And also for the greenery, it is one of the minimum, well, around Asia. Urban shade of open space in the perimeter of a building and high building permeability will significantly improve urban livability. From simulation results of our treehouse project, well, the winning scheme for the Hong Kong GBC competitions, well, only the point PC here, which is under the urban shade, denoted by the red line in the graph, can maintain the outdoor thermal comfort within acceptable range, well, in a typical summer day. A performance-based approach for heat island mitigations is necessary, considering shading, building permeability, ground coverage materials, blue-green features, and heat exhaust locations. Self-shading built forms, while following the non-conventional site coverage, which is the open space approach, can achieve larger upper portions and a slimmer mid to bottom portions. Well, this is great in a way to reduce, probably 20% cut off of the solar irradiance on the facade and substantially EUI reductions of the space conditioning. Facade offer the best opportunities for solar heat, to regulate the solar heat transfer and daylight, integrate high-performance facade, for example, large overhangs with BIPV integrated, daylight reflectors, low E-glazing, and last but not the least, high air tightness, which is often forget about in Hong Kong. Another example is to design for a temperature gradient in an air-conditioned space, which cater different personal preference, which we all have different demand. This needs to go with an activity-based planning where occupants may choose where to work in the workplace. A temperature gradient may be achieved with 26 in the core zone and 29 in the perimeter. Perimeter, for example, by ceiling fans. Well, ceiling fans, something we probably need to revive our traditions. Has the effect of elevated air speed up to 0.8 meter per second in the perimeter will actually allow operative temperature, achieve high comfort, and are individually controllable to the occupant's satisfaction. Another exemplar is the Sky Common concept, linking communal spaces and shared amenities on demand to promote occupants' wellness. These kind of transitional space can be naturally ventilated and daylit and act as a social hub. Automatic operable shutters probably will be needed in these spaces in the mid and high zone to avoid excessive wind. We have carried out performance-based design studies to investigate the thermal comfort conditions. We find out that the building, thermal comfort with natural ventilation is still possible without AC in a typical summer day in the mid and the high zone of a 200-meter tower. Next is about biophilic design. Recent studies confirm that biophilic elements can promote positive emotional response. Integrating these elements in the naturally ventilated shared space can promote the use of this space for social or other activities. And the quality of biophilic design can be optimized by performance-based design process. We can map out different, the number and the weighting for different biophilic elements and look at the visual qualities and how much of these biophilic elements can one perceive in a shared space. On embodied carbon, Emma has talked about this, the carbon queue, and I will skip this for the interest of time. And also the low carbon materials, which, well, the bio-based or fewer finishes, lean design, all these will contribute to lower embodied carbon. We also need to watch out for emerging PV technologies. For PV, well, ideally, we want them to be as light as possible, which is possible with the nano printing technology, and also the very high solar cell efficiency, like in this case, the example of perovskite PV. Radiative cooling coating for PV is also available these days, which will help the PV to radiate heat into space via infrared radiations to improve the PV efficiency by lowering its operating temperature. Well, moving to the last set of strategies, the moonshots. Well, which the 1.5 degree couldn't be complete without accomplishing some of this. I would group this, well, probably under the theme of circularity. Circular buildings envisions no waste, no depletion of natural resources, and no pollutions by design. Well, to achieve this, well, tall order, more network and platform needs to be formed to facilitate discussions, create partnerships, and change for circular economy. To achieve zero embodied carbon, well, within 30 years, without over-reliance on carbon credits, I think paradigm shift is a must from, well, shifting from minimizations of waste and materials to build less or even build nothing as much as possible. Policy and regulation definitely is needed. Clarity and simplicity of the process is needed. Strong incentive and relaxation probably of certain planning restrictions should be addressed with concerted efforts of the stakeholders. Emma also talked about sustainable mass timber. We understand the latest international building code, coming out last year, provide further technical guidance and standard for the use of mass timber. And it categorized the type 4 constructions, up to 18 stories. Availability of regionally grown sustainable timber, updates of the local and national fire codes, upskills of labor for mass timber construction, all these needs to be improved and investigated in order to visualize and realize these visions. Well, last but not the least, besides MIC, which may not be suitable for all building types, platform DFMA may be explored. This is about standardizations at the component level while retaining flexibility of design at the asset level. In other words, the strategies will support highly site-specific and unique architectural designs while bringing the benefits of a manufacturer approach. Using repeatable components will facilitate the use of digital design and constructions, and this iterative design can be highly optimized, as highlighted by Emma previously, I think to minimize the material use, achieve most or more efficient manufacturing and construction process, and to substantially reduce embodied carbon. With that, I would like to conclude my sharing, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussions with the deep dive. For net zero, better life, and be future ready. Thank you.
Mr. Leung, please remain on stage and be seated for the panel discussion. As a reminder, online participants are welcome to use the Q&A box if you have any questions for our speakers. For audience in the room, please raise your hand and we will pass you the mic. Now, please welcome our moderator, Ms. Jenny Zhang, Director of ESG and Decarbonization with Urban Land Institute APAC. Ms. Zhang, over to you, please.
All right, welcome. So shall we invite our speakers for the panels today on stage? It's an absolute honor for me to be here today sharing stage with Emma, KK, Patrick, and Ivan. So thank you, BEC, for organizing, gathering us together today. It's an incredible panel that you've put together, gathering experts from across the different sectors. So today, we've heard from the COP27 sharing on how very little time we have left. The window's closing, and the two presentations also sharing a lot of very promising solutions. So what I like to do in this panel is to talk about, how might we collaborate and change the way we do things so that we can encourage many, if not all of these solutions to be standardized and become massively adopted. So maybe we can start with our presentation speaker. So Emma, you mentioned the construction process. Actually, apologies. Maybe should I allow each of our panel to give a brief introduction about yourself? So the two speakers we've already heard from, Emma and MK. Maybe we can start from KK. A brief introduction for you.
Yes, thank you, Jenny. I would like to share with you about how a cement plant to tackle the net zero challenge. I think like most of the manufacturing industry, it's very difficult because we are turning some material, injecting energy and make it into a product, okay? So especially for a cement plant, which usually have an image of very dirty, okay? In GIC, we have a roadmap to reduce the carbon. And right now, we are formulating a roadmap to achieve net zero. It is not a simple solution. We have to assemble a number of puzzles, putting them together to achieve that target. But there are three main areas which I would like to share with you. The first one is in most of the carbon which we emit during the cement manufacturing is the making of the cement clinker. Okay? So one of the very reasonable solutions is how you can reduce your clinker percentage in your cement. Okay? So there are a number of ways, as the speaker already mentioned. PFA, GGBS are the viable solutions. Hong Kong has a very good experience in PFA. We have used that for, I think, more than 40 years. But as everybody knows, we are switching our fuel mix from coal to natural gas and nuclear. So the supply of PFA will be less. That means the local material is getting less. So what GIC is doing is we invest over 200 million to build a plant which will process the granulated blast furnace slag into GGBS. The plant already start operation in January 2021. And for the developers, if right now they switch the OPC mix to a GGBS concrete, so immediately they can reduce their concrete embodied carbon by half. Okay? So for GIC, probably will reduce our carbon footprint by about 70%. So that's the very first puzzle which we can put in place, but that can be done today. Okay? The second piece of the puzzle goes to the fuel which we use to make clinker. So because we use a lot of coal in making clinker to put it with the energy. So what we are doing is we will include alternative fuel and biomass into our fuel mix to reduce the fossil fuel we're going to use. So right now we have a SP license to use alternative fuel like wood-derived fuel and rubber-derived fuel. But unfortunately, if we look at them, most of them are still fossil bases. So what we are planning to do is to use biomass, like the biochar. Okay? The technology to use the biochar is just right in the corner. So what we need to do is just to make a process integration, to scale it up, and also we need an infrastructure to collect the biomass and convert them into the biochar. So in this area, we need a a cooperation, not just GIC, but from all our stakeholders, including the government, because they hold a lot of the biomass supply. Okay? So with this one in line, we estimated probably we can get rid of another 30% of our carbon footprint. So the last bit of the puzzle go to the carbon capture and utilization. That contribute about 45% of the total. The capture part is the easy part. The most difficult part is when you capture it, you can utilize it, and then you convert that into something which you have to market it. If you can't market it, then it becomes a waste, and it has to be disposed. Okay? There are some options, some of the off-site options like carbon cube. Okay? There are also some brilliant ideas of on-site utilization. Each of them have pros and cons. And GIC right now is studying them very, very carefully. And we might cooperate with some of the local institutes to look at which is best fit for Hong Kong environment. And that's what we're doing. What we see is when we're addressing this climate issue, we see the challenge as well as the opportunities. And we would like to share our thought with all the stakeholders.
Thank you very much for that, KK. As you can see, our panelist today is very passionate about sharing the various solutions as well as the challenges that faces us together. So, because we'll launch right into it. So, on the topic of materials, so Ivan, since your role with the CIC, how is the initiatives like the green product certification system? How could that system be used to help accelerate this material transition toward the lower carbon alternatives?
Thank you, Jenny, for bringing me here. Actually, well, I enjoy very kind of informative presentation as well as like MK presented in a very pleasant way. A lot of pretty pictures and that depicts the future of a better environment for Hong Kong. I come from CIC and I'm the chairman of the Committee on Environment, and we focus in application. I can't agree more about all the solutions that our guest speakers mentioned about, and the approach and the passion in particular. But what CIC, we're part of the stakeholders of the the community, and we're focusing on how to establish the ecology to make these things not only on the research paper, on the desktop, but rather is something that we're really working in our business world. That's what we're focusing. So to build the ecology, we need a lot of docks, from docks to lines, from lines to surface, and then it's the whole ecology. So to name a few about our CIC tools, we name it as tools, such as green product certifications. We have something like 800, to be exact, 113 number of products, and out of that is something like 600, over 600 are concrete. And like KK mentioned, everyone knows GGBC is going to be the solution, but I tell you what, in our market, about only 4% is PFA, 96% are OPC. And the GGBC, yeah, they're done in pilot projects. And why? Because everybody told us that it's widely used for 20 years, some people told me that it's 40 years, it's 80% to 90% of the OPC price, and yet it's not happening. I mean, that's a major mainstream in Hong Kong. So it's the ecology build up. We're doing something like the green product certificate is part of the tool because we, through the encouragement, first thing is we classify them, we group them, categorize them, and let people understand the advantage, like KK just shared about all the advantage, I mean, in terms of price, in terms of environmental performance and all that. But do we have choice? How many investors getting into this industry? We need government, we need the commercial sector people, we need financial investors, we need technical people, and all that, all hopping into this theme. And then we have, like KK said, well, easily we can have 50% kind of a reduction. And go back to like Emma's talking about the embodied carbon. Okay, embodied carbon, everyone knows that is going to be, because the percentage now seems to be small, but when our operation carbon's coming down, it's become bigger and bigger. I think everybody understands this issue. But yet, it's not in the mainstream of any of our local action plan from government. If you zip through Climate Action Plan 2050, it's not there. We focus more in operational carbon, but yet CIC start our carbon assessment tool since I think it's 2019 or 2018, I forgot. Actually, Eddie helped us a lot, and Elmer helped us a lot in putting that up. We prepare something for building up the ecology. And now we receive very positive response from private investors, private developers. They expect, the response, a positive response, enthusiasm is back out of my expectation that they really love this kind of scientific-based tool. And I think what we did as tool, helping people to have something, to implement their green or net zero initiatives. And other like sustainable finance certification scheme. So when people using more about our tools, we try to hook up with the bankers, financial institutes to help to finance those projects, or project-based, or on like sustainability linked loan, which is more on a corporate base. So for approaching net zero, achieving the carbon neutrality, we need not only the construction sector. We look at our city from a life cycle perspective, but we know the construction sector, what we can do, what we can help, what we are just, something like facilitator or even just simply audience. We need to understand our position and what was our limitation and possibility and challenge. And so CIC collaborate with a lot of organizations with same vision like BEC, Beam Society, as well as Green Building Council. We have some collaborative project to mention a few, like the iBeam, which is combining BEAM to the BEAM Plus certification scheme that helps to predict, come up with solution or options for embodied carbon options, blah, blah. And also the other two worth mentioning is about smart waste management. Now imagine, which is being done by CIC with the help of consultants. So imagine we have data about how much solid waste in one site. We have about 18,000 sites in Hong Kong under our system. So in real time, you have that figure, and you have plastic, you have concrete, you have steel. Then a lot of things can happen. And this platform will plug into Environmental Bureau's waste management blueprint. So I think, we just like everybody's here, very passionate to help build up the ecology, and we're doing bit by bit, and we love more collaborations.
Yeah, thank you for that. So you mentioned that the role for private sector and also developers to utilize these tools that are provided to help them measure their progress. So we also have Patrick from Swire here with us today. As a developer, you've taken the initiative to conduct studies on the building materials you use, and also requiring carbon product disclosure from the value chain. So from your perspective as a developer, what does it take to make these kind of practices mainstream? Are there any challenges or hurdles that you see in that?
Thank you, Jenny, for the question. I think as far as properties perspective, as developers, we play a very pivotal role, actually engaging and influencing the whole value chain players, actually, to embracing the new business opportunity and reducing embodied carbon. And we often stand in between, these different experts and stakeholders right across the value chain, and to exert influence on the embodied carbon emission reduction as part of the whole life cycle emissions that the speakers point out. It's therefore important for developers like us to set embodied carbon reduction target in the first place, and also benchmark for new construction large renovation projects, and require a holistic strategy and disclosure on the embodied carbon performance and the whole building design team. We are one of the pioneers in committing setting a science-based target, and within our science-based target, we do have a specific scope-free carbon emission target for embodied carbon. That is, by 2030, we hope to reduce by 20% per square meter for every CFA we built. for our new development projects. And this requires us to look very carefully and closely into the whole supply chain by identifying opportunities to reduce embodied carbon from the building materials you use, from the building design we try to optimize, and also the carbon emissions from the construction process that we do with our main contractors. So owing to the fact there's not much credible data and research on embodied carbon performance on commercial buildings, back in 2018, when we set our science-based target, we initiated a comprehensive cradle-to-site embodied carbon study with Gammon, at that time, our constructor, and also with the HAUST Department of Civil Engineering Department. And that covers, the whole cradle to site to practical completions of the emissions of one Taikoo Place that was completed in 2018. And our study finds that over 90% of the whole cradle to site emissions come from a few things: concrete, rebar, and structural steel, the embodied carbon. So with these findings, we have subsequently established a performance-based target on embodied carbon for our procurement efforts on concrete, rebar, and steel for future projects in Hong Kong. And to quote a case for the two Taikoo Place, the subsequent buildings that's built after one Taikoo Place, we have already procured 100%, basically nearly all, of the low-carbon concrete, which is certified at the platinum level, also by CIC's Green Product Certification Scheme. And also a much higher amount of rebars produced through the electric arc furnace processes, which is a much low-carbon way, and also adopting a lot of recycled steel in the process. And also during building construction, adopted beam modeling to enable us to facilitate the use of prefab structural steel and modularized EMN elements, and to reduce material usage, supporting the circularity sort of principles in our design. And we've also pioneered to include low-carbon procurement specifications for building material used in new development projects, such as concrete, rebar, and steel, in the contracts of our main contractors. And these requirements were now included for our Wan Chai development, and also, becoming a standardized requirement for all our major investment projects in Hong Kong. So we're exploring to do the same in the Chinese market, but of course difficulty lies since it's not as mature as yet. We have that certification scheme in China, and also the material suppliers are not as acknowledging as suppliers in Hong Kong. So we have to do more. But such a contractual requirements actually become a crucial part now to become a supply selection process, and also way forward to make it more mainstream, and also help us improve a lot of transparency in the disclosure and embodied carbon data from supply chain. And that is also, as a listed company, that is becoming more important. I think also speaker mentioned about ISSB, and I think scope 3 emissions is becoming a very major part when we try to explain our, our climate related risks along our supply chain, and that element is going to be a lot more transparency in terms of our disclosure. So I think these all works actually helped us to actually try to support that kind of work, and we have to work better. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. So I want to come back to the two presentations that we just heard. So really the same question for both Emma and MK, which is you've shared a lot of specific solutions, whether ranging from sort of low-hanging fruit to moonshots, right? So in order to see more of these solutions becoming mainstream, how can the rest of the sector help and collaborate to make more of these solutions the standard practice or more widely adopted? Either of you want to take a jab?
Shall I start on the scope 1 and 2 side? I would say that electrification and early electrification is the key. That needs to go in parallel with the delivery of low carbon energy that we've been obviously told will happen in Hong Kong, but we're still finding that we're going on to projects and there's no electricity supply. So the first thing we do is turn on several generators, not just one or two, but I was on a project site a couple of weeks ago. I think we had 17, and that's for a residential development. It's so easy to address if it's planned properly. So this is what I'd really love to see as a low-hanging fruit, and it's so much better for the environment, for the air quality, that our workers are breathing. So yeah, that would be my number one low-hanging fruit. Scope 1 and 2.
Having that grid supply ready to go when it's there. And MK, how about any of your solutions? We want to see them becoming mainstream practice. What needs to happen in the sector, in your view?
Well, I think from an operational carbon point of view, good thing is we have the policy, a very clear roadmap for carbon neutrality. I think, there has been many good works by the professionals, clients, and the building sector, but there are no room for complacency. I think, it is more or less time we should think about a stronger signal to the market for the building label, which we should ask for the super low energy for the benchmark. And eventually, I think, we should adopt that. I think this is the start of the conversations by Hong Kong GBC and many stakeholders. I think this needs to be considered for the certifications. And the professionals and the building industry needs to work together, even though we have the same constraint of time and cost. Different disciplines needs to work in a holistic manner to achieve much higher performance for our clients, for the societies. On the other hand, embodied carbons, I think, of course, the biggest thing I would like to see for change is policy. And the private sector is sending a clear signal. We are concerned about Scope 3. And I think the government should also look beyond Hong Kong, because when we think about the ecosystem, as Ivan has repeatedly mentioned, we should think about Greater Bay Area and how these, as a circular economy, we can build more network and provide more guidance. I think this is something we need to create more partnerships and more change for that aspects.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of the GBA, I also want to go back to the regulation of side. We also have some questions coming from the audience online on this topic, which is about financial incentive and sort of the larger ecosystem. So this question could be, and Ivan and Patrick, I think you're both involved in, from CIC side, there's the financing for retrofitting being talked on the agenda, and then Patrick, I know you're involved in a number of net zero building standards in other markets, and also as a developer role. What do you see as the role of financing and incentivizing for better designs, better retrofits?
Okay. CIC is interested in helping to build up the ecology. The one reason is we see technology as well as approaching net zero is coming up to be a drive for our economy, our new economy. So construction sector is quite traditional, or very traditional. So it's about in the junction point that is exactly the right place for not only for the sake of solution for the solution's sake, but actually through this process we can build the new economy for Hong Kong, like digital business, like recycling material business, blah, 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 blah. And also, we all know the academic and professional kind of opinion are absolutely correct, but how to attract people to participate in this game is particularly for the commercial guys to participate in this game is they must have incentive. I think the trend is coming to developers as well as our stakeholders like big giant kind of contractors. The ESG performers come into play in when they're getting funding from the investor, attracting top quality, the customer and users. They're all looking at this kind of ESG performance in a more scientific base. And that's why they signed the scientific-based target initiative. So a CIC, I mean, is a platform of the construction, stakeholders. We need to encourage building up this ecosystem, this value chain, that when they do good things, they will have something to reward. And at the same time, we bring in new technology to change our traditional way of construction. And yet this process will build up our new companies, incubating our new economy. I think this is the work that CIC is focusing on. And for example, we encourage other than the appreciation, action, and advocacy which what CIC is doing. And at the same time, we prepare fund. We have fund like R&D fund for new technology, including some low carbon. There's some even more particular specific projects for low carbon, and then we fund up. After that, when we see the proof of concept is there, we have CITF, we have Construction Innovation and Technology Fund to help them to commercialize, which is CIC will pay 70%, and then the end user will pay 30%, such that they have more incentive to use that. And then more users become more production, more kind of supply chain establishment. So we also do like Jiusheng. We fund the project to find customers. Hey, this is good products. Why don't you to try it and all that? So we're working along this line.
Yeah. Quite recently, talking to a lot of investors, it would be, their focus is, now moving beyond just Scope 1, Scope 2 emissions to look at our Scope 3 emissions, all right? Of course, we haven't done any green financing instrument yet, tied to the embodied carbon performance. I understand that is coming on because they're the radar, and probably they think that, the Scope 3 emissions is going to be something very important. So I guess we have to prepare. And I think one of the barrier that we have to go through, I think in the local Hong Kong context, is sort of, the availability of embodied carbon data in the Hong Kong context, because currently there's no, verified and very uniform average business as usual construction stage embodied carbon data that, that represent Hong Kong, that we all agree on. And there's no, and as such, we cannot set, very meaningful and informed target and limit for embodied carbon emissions in Hong Kong. So I guess from what I've been participating in a special working group in the UK Net Zero Green Building Standard, I think one of the practice that they do is pretty good. I think their standard will try to set out metrics or benchmark by which net zero carbon performance is evaluated, as well as setting performance targets, limits that need to be met for future years. Based on the industry science-based decarbonization trajectory to achieve net zero for the UK by 2050. And they would very likely the standard to be launched soon to include operational carbon as well as upfront embodied carbon, as well as use phase embodied carbon. And we'll also cover the approach in carbon accounting, things like renewable energy penetration, how you treat residual emissions, carbon offset, etc. So to do this, the UK Net Zero Building Standards is now actually doing a public engagement exercise to seeking case study data from all buildings from the real estate and built environment in the UK. And this data to be aggregated anonymously will be critical for them, for the standard, to ensure to be reflective of the best available evidence for the current UK market, and also help the standard actually set a target and also set a limit. That means you have to meet a certain level of performance for the embodied carbon, not to exceed the limit. I think this is very pioneering, and I think that is a way that for Hong Kong business sector can learn from it and how to adapt it for local context. Of course, also Ivan mentioned about the CIC CAT tool, which is a great tool, and it has collected a lot of good data so far since its launch. I guess this could be a foundation for which Hong Kong to evaluate how to make use of those data to build such a case for Hong Kong to setting target, to setting a limit over time. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Taking another question from the online audience, and then before we go to the audience here. So this question is for KK on. We want to know more about the transition plan on carbon capture and sequestration specifically. And I guess adding on a bit to that, do you see that more as a larger regional ecosystem play, because I think we talked about this a little bit, where there's limitation to what we can do locally to get the cement fully to net zero. So maybe you can comment a little bit about how do we get to the eventual carbon capture and sequestration and getting to cement to net zero.
I think the carbon capture and utilization is the very important bit of the whole picture. Right now, I do not see a plan in place, especially in Hong Kong, how we are going to use the carbon. Unlike UK, which we have the presentation this morning, that the UK do have a storage capacity where they can store the CO2 capture into their oil field. Hong Kong do not have that environment, okay? So we have to think of something which is applicable to Hong Kong. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, that the carbon Q is one, but it cannot provide the 100% solution. It's just one of them. We need more, okay? And that's why we need to look at something which was suitable for Hong Kong environment. So I think we're already talking to some of the institutes. They do have some very bright idea, I would say. So I do not have their consent to release that at this moment, but I think they're very, very innovative, okay? If they success, I think we will have a new business opportunity to Hong Kong, okay? The other area which I really like to look at to see that happen is on the biochar. Hong Kong do have a lot of biomass. Right now, they are being disposed to landfill. We are not really fully utilize the biomass of this kind. And you just imagine, we have quite a number of trees around us. I think 3/4 of Hong Kong is covered with trees. So we have a lot of yard waste. On the other hand, we also have some import biomass, like we have the wooden pallets from the cargo. We have the furnitures. We have the wood which we build the formwork for the constructions. We have the bamboos. So we have a series of high good biomass, woody waste to low quality woody waste. Right now, they're having problem of disposal. So if we can have I would say, a policy on how we deal with this biomass, we can turn them into biochar, which can replace 100% of the fossil fuel which we're going to use. And that's not difficult, I would say. The technology to make biomass is already there. So we just need some consent from all the stakeholders, like the government, because they do own most of the biomass. What do they want? I think if the biochar is successful, we're going to kill two birds with one stone. So we solve the fossil fuel problem. At the same time, we solve the waste management problem.
Yeah, thank you for that. It seems like the sort of common theme here is that we can connect these dots by turning waste into input, into valuable materials, so long as the infrastructure and the policy sort of builds up the larger ecosystem, whether it's financial support, whether it's value chain buy-in to support these solutions. So I do want to leave a little bit of time for audience questions. Is there anyone want to ask a question? Please, briefly say who you are, and if your question is for a specific panelist or open to anyone to answer.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. And thank you, Emma and MK, for your fruitful presentation. And I'm Jason from Archimex Construction, and quite interested in the technology of carbon cure, as you mentioned, both of you mentioned in your presentation. And as mentioned, Emma's presentation about the carbon cure technology, you said is not a huge saving, but still counting. So can you deliver more information about the carbon cure technology trial in Hong Kong, and something about the carbon reduction performance compared to the conventional one, compared to GGBS concrete or something like that, and also where do you get the carbon dioxide source? The source of carbon dioxide in Hong Kong. And sorry, another question for MK. You said also about the carbon capture technology, and you said it's conservative to import the carbon capture technology in Hong Kong. So what is the major concern to import this kind of technology? Thank you.
So the carbon, just to put it in context then, we can get about up to 35% replacement with PFA, up to, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, 55% replacement with GGBS. If we add with the carbon cure, we can reduce the cement by around 4 to 6%. So not much, 4 to 6%. And the reason you can get that reduction is that it reacts and mineralizes, basically. So you add strength to it. At the same time, you are sequestering a small amount of carbon dioxide into that concrete as well as you're mixing it. And that's about 15 kilograms per meter squared. I'm looking at Eddie. I'm hoping he's going to correct me if I'm wrong. What was your second question? Yes. So where's the carbon dioxide coming from? At the moment, we're procuring it through Linde, the gas company, and it's coming as a byproduct from a petrochemical plant in the Guangdong region. So it's essentially waste carbon dioxide, and that is a really important part of the process. So we did check on that it is basically a byproduct. It is waste gas. Did that answer your question? And then I think there was another one for you, wasn't there? Okay, sorry.
I can supplement that. The carbon dioxide source. In Hong Kong, we have the 2 power plants. They do have CO2 emission. Even they burn the natural gas, it's still carbon dioxide there. We have town gas, the third one, and the cement plant. I think these are the 4 major stationary sources of CO2.
Yeah, the gas supplier at the moment is just taking it directly from the refinery process. Yeah. So obviously capturing it in the first place from an industrial process or from a coal-fired power plant or natural gas, that part in itself is very challenging. So yeah. This is currently an easier source of CO2 that is available now that we can buy, but in future there could be other sources, as you say.
Yeah, but the carbon cure, what do you call it? It's a off-site usage, because you have to capture it, store it, and then transport to a concrete plant, and then you pump it into the fresh concrete. So the other one is you forget about the transportation. You do an on-site utilization, directly pull the CO2 from the flue gas, and then you got something like a desulfuric plant. You wash it out, and then you form a new material. That's what we call the on-site treatment.
All right. So I think we have room for one more question, maybe. All right.
Hello, I'm David Chan from Amo Solar. We are solar panel energy company. A question. Firstly, thanks to Ronald Liu to actually start talking about a good presentation about using renewable energy, for instance, and I'm glad to see BIPV is actually mentioned. There's a lack of use of BIPV in Hong Kong. My question here, the Hong Kong Exchange has set up a carbon trading platform for basically to trade carbon, and the whole principle is to encourage the financing of renewable energy, for carbon reduction. What are the speakers here? Would they be thinking of investing into that trading platform? Maybe perhaps by doing so, maybe buying carbon credit or trade carbon credit so that they can actually have a method of financing some of these initiatives that I'm talking about. I mean, for instance, Mr. Choi just talking about how to capture, how to use bio-grade and how to capture carbon, for instance. But the problem is that how do you finance all these things? I mean, the company themselves, they can perhaps finance it themselves, but wouldn't it be better if some of that is actually get channeled into some specialist company that actually do these kind of thing, and they, at the moment, there is no market for them. You go and do, perhaps you can collect all the wood and make them into a product, but financially, it's almost impossible to actually do something like that to start up. So if there's a way, a government or some sort of financial method that can finance that, then it becomes a viable way for it. Perhaps some of the speaker might elaborate a little bit more on that. Thank you.
Actually, the Hong Kong Exchange they launched that program, I think by the end of October. It's in a very elementary stage. And I think the issue is in the accreditation, how to define the asset. Is it an asset? And there are a lot of standards now. There's no unified standards at the moment, and that's why Hong Kong would like to take the lead. And that's what I'm saying. Construction industry, construction sector is something I always advocate that to the government that energy and the transportation are the biggest sector, and it's easy to define. I mean, like those power plants or something, they can define more easily. And in terms of the mesh, in terms of the ease of accreditation, that's easier. But for construction sector, I think we should take this as a challenge, and also it's a new opportunity for us how to define it, because our supply chain is so long, from designer to material procurement and subcontractors, hundreds of subcontractors and workers and all that, and the volume is small, and how to make it sensible in terms of economy value is something, but I totally agree that we should move along that direction. And the first thing is the definition of carbon asset, and at the moment we don't have unified rules.
All right, so I know if we can spend easily another hour on many of these topics, so I just like to wrap up our discussion today, but I hope this is the beginning of many conversations across the sector between construction, design, development, policy, financing, and cross-regionally. So I want to give a big thank you to all of our panelists today for sharing your wisdom with us. And also everyone who's in the room and online with us asking your questions, please keep them coming and keep talking about them. Thank you so much.
Thank you to our speakers and moderator for the comprehensive sharing.